right, to pat. And now what happens? He goes out for a evening stroll on the top of the rooftop, right? Nothing wrong. The Jerusalem sunset is beautiful, right? I just saw somebody on Instagram post some Jerusalem sunset. I think it was Jefferson Franklin. Beautiful sunsets over Jerusalem. And he's looking at, from the rooftop, he went up to look at to look at the sunset. And other than sunset, he saw other things, right? And his heart was, human being, right? We all have weaknesses. We all have things that we fall. He fell. He looked at this woman and he felt he wanted to know what was going on with her. So he could have stopped there. No, he didn't stop. He could have turned back and said, "Boys, I got distracted. I looked at something. Now let's go play some cards, or let's go play volleyball, something." He didn't do that. He called the servants and said, so he didn't stop the mistake there. He went one step further, right? First mistake, it's not even a mistake, right? Because temptation, the Bible says, comes and comes in front of us, right? It's not the mistake that the temptation comes in front of us. What we do about it is what matters, right? And next, instead of distracting himself and telling, let's go have a hobby, he didn't have a hobby. That's his problem, right? And he calls and says, go out and inquire about this woman, who I saw just now taking a bath. And then he could have known, oh, it was Uriah's wife. The moment he knew it was Uriah's wife, he could have stopped there, right? He could have stopped there. Uriah was one of his faithful servants, one of his friends. Uriah was one of his friends. He goes one step further and brings her in and does things happen that shouldn't have happened. And then news comes that Bathsheba is pregnant. So what should he could have stopped at that point and said, okay, I made a mistake, right? He didn't stop there either. He went one step further. He wanted to put it on Uriah, and Uriah, being the faithful man, he comes in and he, I think you all know the story. That's why I wanted you to read it, because I don't want to be very explanative in front of younger folks in the room. So you could have Uriah, he could have told Uriah, I made a mistake, right? Look at the places that God gave him, one step after another, to have corrected his sin, right? I made a mistake, sorry. No, he had already gone way beyond all of that. David in his heart had gone way beyond all of that. This is who's this guy? This is a man after God's own heart who's trying to, who didn't want to kill the Israelites, right? When the Philistines sent, just a few years before that, when the Philistines would send him out as a mercenary to kill Israelites, he would not kill the Israelites, he would kill the Amalekites and come and say, I killed all of this Israeli. He didn't want to touch his own people. And here he is plotting to kill his own friend who's an Israelite, right? Sin gets us. If we don't accept it and own up to it, it'll get us, and it'll get us rolling, right? And what happens next? Now Uriah is being too faithful to him. He says, I'll sleep in your palace rather than go. And so, okay, now go back to the army. And he sends a note with him to Joab, who is David's faithful friend and confidant and commander-in-chief. And Uriah is taking his own death note to Joab, right? And Joab puts him in the worst place in the fight and gets him killed. Not one mistake. Many places where he could have stopped, he never did. Hey, it can happen to anybody, right? We were talking about him just a minute ago, how awesome he was, how obedient he was. Correct? Where was I? Yeah. So he could have done, at all these places he never stopped. And then I lost my track. thought for a second, but I was thinking about something else, but I don't think I can say it here. So, all of this because he lost focus on what his calling was, right? Know this. That's why you and I can never lose track of what our calling is. That's why a daily walk with the Lord is so important, because every day when you walk with the Lord, when you know His Word, when you sit and spend that time alone with Him, you will not get distracted, because the Lord will bring you back to His purposes, to His heart. But when you take a season off, this is what happens. The enemy and the world is so strong, they will try to pull you in. That's why all the social media stuff and everything, the world cries out. My brothers and sisters, the world is crying out to you and me to be distracted by things. It's so easy to be distracted. I was 20 a few years ago. I was 25 a few years ago, right? I know how when you are at that young age, the world cries out to you, right? The world is louder. God is so silent, but the world is loud. The world wants to grasp your attention and try to deviate you from where you're supposed to be, right? Hey, doesn't mean when you're 25 you'll have it. When you're 50 you'll have it too. When you're 60 you'll have it. When you're 70, there'll be, we'll all. The Bible says that the enemy is waiting like a roaring lion to see whom he may devour. Not only when you're 20 or 30, when you're 40 and 50 and 60 and 70 years too, right? So that's the enemy's job. Know that. You have to know. That's why you need to know the spiritual world that's around there. So what happens? All started because he lost his focus. Okay. So sometimes being busy is not a bad thing. Okay. I'm just telling you that. Being busy is not a bad thing. Sometimes being too leisurely might cost you. So anyway. So what happens? Uriah dies, marries her after Uriah dies, but lives with the constant guilt in his heart, right? Nobody knows about it except Joab, right? Maybe a couple of people here and there who are very, very close to David. Nobody else knows about the story. So he marries Bathsheba, and they have this child. The Bible doesn't even mention whether it's a boy or a girl. Nothing. There's no mention of it in the Bible, right? And then Nathan, this stand-up man of God called Nathan, comes up to David, the king, right, and says, I have a story to tell you. And he tells him the story about how this man had. That's why I want you to read, because I can't waste time going through the story. But in essence, he tells the story of David's story and says, what do you do to that man who took that lamb from this person who only had one? And David said, he needs to get killed. And Nathan confronts him and said, the Lord spoke to me, that man is you. He confronts him in front of the whole court. Okay, it wasn't a private conversation. It was in front of everybody. Okay, and he tells him, you are the man. You killed Uriah to have his wife. And the kid, the baby that is there right now, you are not supposed to have had. And what happens? Joab is waiting there with his sword in his hand, his commander-in-chief. Nathan is starting to talk too much. David, give me the sign, I'll kill him. Seriously. That is how it was. Okay? And the first thing that David does, look at David again. Again, a man who is obedient and is always towards the things of God, even in his mistakes. Right? He jumps up and says, Joab, no, don't do that. I made that mistake. It's on me. Who would say that? Did Bill Clinton say that? Who would say that? It's on me. First, without any resistance, because he knew God had spoken to him through this man. Right? When you know you made a mistake, Jeremiah, when you know you made a mistake, you stand up and you accept it right away. You are a man and you are a woman of God if you own up to your mistakes the first instant you get, because you know deep in your heart that that's what you did. Right? You don't fight it. You don't fight it with God. You will end up losing anyway. Don't fight it with God. You lose. Anyway you lose. Either through your life or things in your life you lose if you fight with God and you try to hide something from the Lord. No, you will end up losing a lot. So David's response, verse 13. That is verse 13.
And David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan replied, the Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die.
Correct. Immediately David accepts, and the beauty is, immediately God forgives him. In a moment's time. Right? Through Nathan. Right? The moment he owns up to a mistake, what does God do? Okay, I forgive you. You're not going to die. This won't happen all the time. Okay? If somebody does something wrong to me, and they come up and say sorry, I'll know if they're saying it truthfully or not. Right? Most of the time, we'll know when somebody is saying it truthfully or not. When you know they're not meaning it truthfully, do you think you'll say, okay, I forgive you, and just walk away? No. I don't think you're truthful. Correct? Hey, isn't that what we will say? Long ago, 2010, me and Mary, we watched a movie called Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara. Right? In that movie, it's a Hindi movie, okay? For those of you who know, who don't watch movies, forgive me. I'm a semi-Christian, if you want to think about it that way. We went after many years, I think there was a date night, we went out, and that movie has a scene in it where Javed, what actor is it? Farhan Akhtar? Right? He tells Hrithik Roshan, he keeps on telling the hero, this guy tells the hero, hey, sorry, forgive me, I made a mistake many years ago, right? And the hero never forgives him. He says, no, I'm not going to forgive you. He keeps fighting for like 3 or 4 scenes in that movie, they keep fighting. And then in one particular scene, this guy, Farhan, actually truthfully accepts his mistake. Okay? Truthfully accepts his mistake, and he says, will you forgive me now? Okay? If you were there in that scene, you will know that he truthfully accepted that mistake. And Hrithik immediately, whatever, it's a movie. Okay? I'm not making a big deal out of it. But he immediately says, now I know you truthfully accepted your mistake. And you're really, really sorry for it. Right? So, if you are that, when somebody, when God confronts you, truthfully accept it.